Hello and welcome back to Jeffy and Chihuahua. Today we're going to be doing kind of a story time to let you guys know what happened with all of the dog beds that we made. So where the story begins is our first craft show. I met a lady there. She was walking around to all of the booths and introducing herself, and she told me that she had a shelter that she ran. We got talking. She seemed very well put together and pretty, I don't know, I feel fooled, honestly. Like, I shouldn't have trusted her. And I think that that's the moral of this whole entire story, is do a lot of research before you give someone something and before you put any of your time and energy into it, because this lady was not who I expected her to be. When we started talking, she was really, really nice, and she told me she ran a small shelter. I told her that I always wanted to give a bunch of dogs in a shelter beds for Christmas, and since she said that her shelter was smaller, it seemed like a good match. I told her that this year I probably couldn't afford to do it because I had just started my business, but that I would like her information because possibly in the future I would be able to do something like that. I went on her website, and on her website there was a photo of all of these dogs just sitting on couch cushions on the floor, and there was 2 old couches around it, and this photo had about 10 dogs in it. So I figured, she really could use these dog beds. And I look and I see that she only has 5 dogs up for adoption. And at that point in my head, I'm like, you know what? I have a lot of fleece material. I would only have to pay for the stuffing right now. So I went ahead and messaged her on Instagram, and I was like, I see you only have 5 dogs. I know I said I couldn't afford to do it this year, but if you only have 5 dogs, I would love to make beds for them. So she sends me a message back, and she's like, you know what? We actually have 9 dogs, but 5 is okay. And so we messaged back and forth for about 3 days, maybe 4 days, and that was getting the information on the dog sizes and the dogs' names and genders so that I could make the proper beds for them. And I tell her that over the next week I'll be making them, and that I would get a hold of her when they were finished. So she should have been expecting a message from me within the next week. And so there was that 1 full week for me to make the beds, and then that week would end on Sunday, and then we had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and on Wednesday was Christmas. And also, she knew that I wanted these to be Christmas gifts for the dogs. Like, I was very verbal about the fact that these were Christmas gifts for the dogs. So she told me okay when I told her I would make them the week before Christmas, and I even told her that I would be dropping these dog beds off. She could just let me know when and where. All she had to do was be available to accept the beds. Thursday of that week, I sent her a message letting her know that the dog beds would be made that weekend, and that I was sorry that it was kind of the end of the week. But, it was still within the time frame that I had originally told her. Saturday night, I realized that I didn't have enough stuffing for all of the beds, and I sent her a message letting her know that they would be ready Sunday morning, and that I could drop them off anytime after that. So I still haven't heard back from her since those original messages that we exchanged where she told me the gender and the sizes of the dogs. And at this point in time, I started to be mad at myself because I thought that it was my fault that the dogs weren't going to get these beds before Christmas. I thought that it was because I didn't do them soon enough, and that she must have been out of town or something of the sort for Christmas. So the days leading up to Christmas, I'm constantly checking my Instagram to see if she messaged me back, because it was just kind of making me sad. And Christmas morning I wake up, and I had planned to take Android for a picnic, and I honestly almost cried Christmas morning, because the first thing that happened when I got on my phone Christmas morning was I saw a photo of her with a dog that she posted not only to her Instagram but to her Facebook, and this dog was sitting on a bed. She led me to believe that these dogs didn't have beds, and I guess she didn't lead me to believe that, but if you already have dog beds, why are you accepting the ones that I'm trying to give to shelter dogs who don't have beds? Another thing I realized in her photos, because at this point I started to look a little bit farther back, I wanted to know when the last time she posted was, because once again, if she was just posting on Christmas morning, maybe she hadn't been online for the last week. But no, her other photo, her second to last post on Instagram was 3 days prior. So this woman has been on social media the entire time, has probably seen all of my messages and just chose not to respond to me. And you know what else really bothered me about her telling me that she ran a shelter? When I think shelter, I think of a place kind of like a doggy daycare where they have cages on both sides of the room and of course areas for the dogs to play, but I think of dogs that are living in essentially cage situations. And I realized when I was going through all of her photos that number one, she lives in a fancy house, a very nice fancy house. And number two, she's running this out of her home. So none of these dogs, in my opinion, are shelter dogs. She's essentially being a foster dog mom, which sure is a nice thing to do, but don't play yourself off as a shelter that would need to take donations from people when you just want people to keep giving you stuff for the dogs that you're keeping in your home. It really made me sick. It made me sick and it made me sad, you know, that I could be tricked so easily. Because like I said, when I went to her website, and I should have gone through more of her social media, but when I went to her website and I was originally trying to see if her thing was legitimate or not, it did look more like a shelter situation, or at least a situation where they didn't have enough. So like I said, I pretty much almost cried on Christmas because it made me so upset, and I was supposed to be taking him to a waterfall, so my friend convinced me to try and let it go and just enjoy the day. And it was even worse because I had vouched for her in my first video saying that she was a nice shelter. I even put a link to her Amazon wish list at the bottom of the video. So trying to let all that go, I sent her a message on Christmas, and it was very nicely put. I mean, there's a lot of choice words I could have used, but I very, very nicely just said, I'm really hurt by this and I'm really upset because you haven't messaged me back for over a week and a half now when you knew I was making these for you. And secondly, it doesn't look like you're in need. And I said that I would be finding a better shelter to give the dog beds to that could actually use them. And she never responded. You know, not even to say sorry. And that, in my opinion, would have been the appropriate thing to do in that situation, because I didn't send her a nasty message. I just told her why I was hurt over the way she treated me, and she didn't care. She didn't care because she never actually needed the things I was trying to donate to dogs that actually needed them. So, where did the dog beds go? So I did a little bit more research, and I found a place in my town that takes in dogs. And this time around, I was not so trusting. When I called them, I was questions first, and I didn't tell them my intentions or that I was a donor, nothing. I just came right out the bat with some very intense questions about how they run their facility. And once I was convinced that it was a good facility to donate these to that actually had a need, that was when I told them that I had 5 beds that I had made to donate to dogs that needed them, and that these beds needed a new home. They were very sweet to me on the phone. They told me their hours and when I could come in to drop them off. I would love to share the name of the shelter with you guys, but it does have the name of the town I'm living in attached to it, so I don't quite feel comfortable with that. But when I went in, I asked if I could take a photo of one of the dogs on the dog bed. That way I had proof for you guys, you know, that the dog beds were actually delivered somewhere that needed them. And this facility was huge. I honestly have never seen a nicer dog adoption facility in my life. They had their own veterinary clinic there that did inexpensive like spay and neuter and microchipping just for the public. And then they also had a huge adoption center. And I'm not kidding, outside they had like 5 different areas that were fenced off for dogs to go play in, and they were massive. I've never seen a dog facility this nice. And when I walked in, I shouldn't say accidentally, I didn't quite know where I was going. So I walked into the spot where you would drop off a dog or a cat that you were no longer able to keep. And when I walked in there, the ladies were super nice and helpful. One of them came to the car to help me carry in the dog beds, and I helped her carry all of the dog beds back in. And I got to essentially walk through almost the entire facility because I helped her carry them back to a little storage room that they had, and I've never seen a cleaner or more organized building in my entire life. This place was immaculate. And once we brought in some of the beds and put them in that room for them to give to the dogs, I asked if I could take a photo so I'd have proof that they made it there. And so the woman was like, oh yeah, no problem, let's go up to the adoption area. I asked what bed we should take, and they chose the largest bed because it had the dog paw prints on it. And I walked through the rest of the facility with her all the way up to the place where people were adopting dogs. And I'm not kidding, they had like 3 or 4 families in there adopting that day. It was really nice to see. And they had this really cool area in the front room that was kind of like a little fence, and they had 2 chairs on the inside of it. And that area was used for people meeting the dogs that they would potentially be taking home with them. And there was a little puppy in there, and so the woman asked if that would be an okay dog, even though we brought a huge bed, and I was like, yeah, not a problem. So I took that bed into the caged area, and the family that was in there was totally okay with it. And we dropped off that big dog bed, got our photos, and then when we were done, I asked if we should carry it back or not, because the ladies knew that my intention was for the beds to be given to dogs that had been in the shelter for a long time, and then once they got adopted out, the beds could go with them. And in my opinion, why I think that's a good idea is because it would give people more of a reason to choose those dogs over the other ones, because they come with the free bed and they've been there the longest, so they need the help. But that big one, once we dropped it in that area, it really was perfectly fitting, and it's a beautiful large bed. So the lady was like, do you mind if this one just stays up here? And of course, you know, I was totally happy with that, especially because that one was the nicest, biggest bed, and it's really beautiful. So it's really brightens up the front room, and the front room was already gorgeous, but it's nice to know that something I made can help make the space a lot brighter and just more homey, you know. So I ended up being very, very happy with the results of this whole project, and it really, really taught me to be careful who you donate to. People can seem like one thing and actually be another thing, and if you want to make sure that what you're donating goes somewhere good, you really have to research it, because people will take free stuff all day, you know. So that's pretty much the whole story. I'll insert a small clip at the end of this video of that puppy checking out that dog bed. And yeah. Well, thank you guys for watching. I know this story was a little bit not so fun, but it did have a good ending. It did. Well, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Aww. Perfect.